Hello, my name is Anna McKinstry, and today I'm going to be discussing how the Riddell Lab at UNC Chapel Hill investigates animal behavioral adaptations in response to changing environmental conditions. Climate change is the main reason why this research is so important, and so here's just some evidence of climate change. For example, the average surface temperature of Earth has increased 2 degrees since the late 19th century, but a majority of this change has occurred in the last few decades. Glaciers are melting globally and losing mass, causing an increase in sea levels of over 9 inches since 1880. There's increased intense storms, wildfires, droughts, etc., all over the world, but particularly affecting us in the United States, as we have seen. Oceans are absorbing heat and carbon dioxide, which leads to coral bleaching and warmer ocean temperatures not suitable for marine ecosystems. And species are also shifting ranges of occupation and their migration and breeding seasons. Here are just some images that exemplify this evidence. Top left is an increase in the surface temperature. On the right shows decreasing glacier size, and the bottom left is coral bleaching. Because of these changes, animals must find ways to survive, not just physically adapting, but also changing their behavior. So the Riddell Lab investigates how these animals change their behavior to adjust to these environmental changes. It explores the potential for animals to adapt or acclimate to stressful environments, and they're currently working to understand how desert mammals adjust metabolic rates, water loss rates, and body temperature in response to seasonal changes in climate that change more drastically because of climate change. Here are just some research results from the Riddell Lab, such that salamanders from lower elevations have lower water loss rates to minimize rapid dehydration. We can also use this data to investigate where they will live across the Appalachian landscape, and we've also discovered trade-offs between water loss and metabolism and respiration that is important to understanding physiology of animals. Not only does this research explore the mechanisms that the organisms have to adapt to these environmental stressors, but also explores them in a deeper way to gain a deeper understanding, allowing us to look at evolutionary patterns of how the traits are conserved and how it might benefit them in the future as climate changes. It is doing incredibly important work as climate change progresses, and as citizens and as scientists, we need to understand the consequences of climate change progression that we have caused and how these impacts alter populations, including our own. The research uses biophysical models based on averages and estimations of field organisms that can allow us to look at animal behavior in a lab and relate it back to field organisms. They have lab and field experiments. They look at functional genomics and also evolutionary charts, as well as using biophysical simulations, which is the focus of this research. Some examples are heat balance models, where they simulate how animals exchange heat, predicting body temperature based on the environmental conditions in their region, such as solar radiation, wind, humidity, and also the animal's physical characteristics. There is also evaporative water loss models that have been used in multiple of the experiments that examines how much water an animal loses under different humidity and temperature conditions. They also use habitat suitability models that allow for them to predict where an animal may be best suited to live based on waterfall and temperature patterns shifting. They also track energy intake and loss to estimate survival and reproduction rates of species. They also conduct field work where they do real life observations of animals with either people or technology so that we can watch from a distance. The publication I did my report on looks at tree swallows' nests every 3 days by hand to make observations of their behavior and how they respond to differences in humidity and temperature. This work that is being done by the Riddell Lab, however, is incredibly important not only to understand amphibians and reptiles and birds, but all different kinds of species all over the world and all different sorts of climates. It is incredibly important that we have a deep understanding of this so that we can guide conservation efforts. We have to put the time, resources, and money toward the correct species to understand who is actually at threat of extinction. Conservation efforts can be used to protect already endangered species or to prevent extinction, and that is why the work that is being done at the Riddell Lab at UNC is incredibly important for protecting not only our species, but every species on this planet.